All right, welcome everyone. My name is Judith Sullivan and I am the Dean of the Philadelphia Episcopal Cathedral. It is a great privilege to meet with all of you today and with our very wonderful, inspirational, distinguished panelists. I'm going to take a moment and introduce them, each one, and then ask them if they would speak briefly about the work of their organizations. We have Madeleine, who is curator and founder of Soul's Shot Portrait Project. Maxayn Gooden, who is the founder and president of Ja World 18 and Women of Valor 74. She is also the mother of Jason Ahmad Patton, whose portrait is hanging on our cathedral walls. It is by Carolyn Stoughton, and it will be, I know, included within this video presentation. And Bryan Miller, who is the executive director of Heeding God's Call. Welcome, everyone. So if you would, we'll pass the microphone. If you could tell us a little bit about the goals and work of your organization, we would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be the least important voice that you'll hear. But I just want to briefly give a little background of the project. It is meant to use artwork to move people in an invitational way rather than confrontational, and to bring people who see the exhibitions and see the portraits to a place of empathy where they can understand what the cost of gun violence is. And we have fine artists who apply to be part of the project, and we have a jury that judges them for professional quality of their work. And we randomly pair them with amazing families who are incredibly brave to participate in the project. And they agree to meet with an artist, a perfect stranger, and tell the story of their loved one. And excuse me, the artists then interpret that life. And as you can see from the artwork here, there's all different kinds of approaches and styles and mediums, and I think it makes for a richer experience too, because they're as diverse as the people were in life. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about it. I'll just mention that it's completely free to participate, and the artists donate their time. So that's about it. I'll pass it to Maxayn.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maxayn Gooden, and I am as she mentioned, the president and founder of Women of Valor 74 and Ja World 18. Women of Valor 74 started off as a mentoring program for young girls between the ages of 12 and 18, and I started that basically just to help inner city young women learn to love themselves, be more confident and not think that they have to look like what social media says or what videos say about them. And also Ja World, and now that has turned into life coaching for women, and also I do panel discussions for women, empowerment brunches and things of that nature, all to help and heal women. Ja World 18 is in loving memory of my son, Jason Patton. I started that in December of 2017. And that came about when he was murdered. I wasn't prepared, so his godmother did a GoFundMe. After all the expenses were paid, I just took the rest of the money and I started off a football scholarship in his honor, because he played football and he had a 3.5 GPA. So the rest of that money started the scholarship. And then I just took it a step further and I started a mentoring program for young men between the ages of 12 and 18. And that's held at Boys Latin School, which is the school that he was a senior at, ready to graduate before his untimely murder.
Hi folks, nice to see you all here, and I'm grateful for this opportunity as well. I'm Bryan Miller, Executive Director and co-founder of Heeding God's Call to End Gun Violence. We've got a long name, so we shorten it after the first time, so we just refer to it as Heeding. We've been around for about 13 or 14 years. We are totally faith-based and grassroots, and our sort of global goal, if you will, is to energize the American and Pennsylvania faith communities to get deeply involved in gun violence prevention, because sadly, that's not the case. There are many churches and faith institutions that are involved in sort of an individual way, but in terms of a real organization of the faith community, it's lacking, which is ahistorical, if you will, because the faith community has basically led every national social movement for change in American history, except for this one. So our goal is to do what little we can to organize the faith community, and we've started here in the Philadelphia area. Although we're now statewide, we go out to Allegheny County and the center of the state and so on. And we use, we have a sort of what we call a stepped program, a set of activities that are positive. Our messaging is all positive, and the activities that we have developed over time are intended to appeal to people of faith and institutions of faith in a non-conflictual way. And then so our hope is to appeal to people, get them involved in what we do, and move them gradually along a spectrum of advocacy towards real activism to prevent gun violence. So we enjoy this. We have close association with the Cathedral. Here we've had our Memorial to the Lost, which many of you have seen around. There are several of them, T-shirt memorials that have the name, age of death, and date of death of Philadelphians who have been murdered with guns, handguns typically. And we have a relationship with the Diocese of Pennsylvania as well that we work closely with. So it's a great pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Bryan. Friends, before I ask you how we, members of this congregation, and how other congregations can very specifically get involved to make a difference, I'd first like to stay with the power of this exhibit, which is up on our walls, which is incredibly moving. I think that this is the third time that we have had a Souls Shot exhibition in this cathedral. That's not good news, that we are still curating exhibits of portraits of young persons shot to death on our streets. But I would like to, each one of you, to respond to the exhibit itself and share, if you would, what it means to you, how you understand the power of Souls Shot and the difference that it makes in changing hearts and minds.
Yeah, thank you. And I also wanted to say that we started as not as a project, but as a one-time exhibition in support of Heeding God's Call. And the first exhibition was, there was the Memorial to the Lost on the lawn in front of the church where it was. And I think of that, and I don't know if you do, Bryan, but I think of that Memorial to the Lost and the T-shirts. I think of that as an art piece, and it engages in a very similar way. It makes that connection, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, we've been going for 6 or 7 years, and I have never experienced someone walking through one of our exhibitions and not just, being pretty speechless. And the hope is that they would go on to do something like join Heeding God's Call, or, I don't know, get involved in some way. Because I started this as an artist I'm not really a marcher or a demonstrator, and this was a way to do something. And I would say that probably 100% of the artists would agree with me. It's something that we can do to connect with people and hopefully move them to take action. So I don't know if that answered your question.
I know that as a parent, seeing his picture, and for many others that see the pictures of their loved ones, it brings them back to life for us. The artist that did your son's portrait, not only he was murdered at 18, but she captured him at 18, but she also captured him at the age that he would have been today, which I found to be so amazing, because as a mom, I just think about what he would look like today. So for her to capture that, and the first time I saw it, I still well up, it just brings me, it's joy to me. And it really shows who he was. And I love the Soul Shots Portraits project because they're not just a number. You get to see who they are. You get to know who they are. And as a parent, that's what we want you to see. We want you to know who they were, the lives that they lived, and who they were in real life. And this project definitely does that. But also, as Laura mentioned, it brings people to a place of what can I do to help, or what needs to be done? How can we stop, hopefully not be able to have to do any more of these portraits?
Yes, we did start with Heeding God's Call and Soul Shot several years ago, and I agree that there are similarities between the two, between our Memorial to the Lost and the Soul Shot Portrait Project. I haven't seen it for a couple years at least, and I have to say that the quality is outstanding. It's really a marvelous exhibit. Our T-shirt memorial is a little less beautiful or special, but we intend to honor the people lost to gun violence and their families and their neighbors and their friends. And I believe that happens. We often have people see a T-shirt that was a loved one of theirs, and we ask them at that point we ask to meet them there at the memorial, give them the T-shirt that's been hanging there, and then we replace it with another. And it's I think very often people who are, almost always, who are murdered with guns in this city, they get no message and no mention in the newspaper or on TV or whatever. So we, like Soul Shot, really, we love that we're honoring them and giving them a platform as well.
Thank you. It strikes me, yes, honoring, personalizing, telling personal stories, and activating people's compassion so that there is no distance here. People enter into the horror of gun violence that we read about, that we see on television, and that families are experiencing in our schools, in our homes, on our streets. And this touches us, I think this exhibit touches us in a way, and the T-shirts as well, in a way that can't be held at arm's length. So if you have an opportunity, may I say, organizations, houses of worship, to participate, we would encourage you to do so, to reach deeply into your communities in the city of Philadelphia, and I want to say especially beyond the city of Philadelphia, which leads me to my next question. This violence is overwhelming. It can feel paralyzing, I imagine, for many. There are some among us who may be quite convinced that there is nothing that they can do to make a difference, to make a dent in the outcomes around this, especially in the light of recent legislation and court decisions and funding decisions in communities. And so I ask, what can we do? What do you recommend? Where do we begin? If you are sitting in your living room at home watching this presentation, where does that person begin to get involved? Please, Bryan.
There's lots that can be done and lots that individuals and institutions can do. We all know that the Supreme Court just ruled recently and struck down regulations about the carrying concealed handguns in public in the state of New York. It will have an important effect on a number of states, but Pennsylvania is not one of them. I don't think it's going to have any effect on Pennsylvania, frankly, which doesn't mean there aren't lots of things that can be done. We work on, for instance, at Heeding God's Call, I mentioned the spectrum of advocacy before. Our goal is to move people along it and to have people start to do things to bring about change. And this involves both change in culture and change in law. Change in culture is the fact that we're faith-based and we work with churches and synagogues and mosques. When we can get the memorial to the lost, for instance, up on their front lawn as it was here, then it opens space in those faith institutions for us to do programming, to talk about the problem. It opens space for people who sat down the pew from someone for 10 or 15 years and never knew how they felt about the issue of guns or gun violence, and they begin to talk and so on. That sort of talk and discussion and thought is critical to bringing about change, because otherwise people are going to sit in the place that they are and not seek change. We work on legislation, and we here in the state in particular, and that's something that I think is important for people to understand, and I've been doing this for 25 years, is that you can have an effect on a state basis much more than you can on the federal legislation, for instance. Things don't happen in D.C. until they've happened out in the states. So I always urge people to focus on what's on, in this case, on Harrisburg, and let's work with us and work with other folks on seeking change in the law. And I also think that it's important to focus on particular items and not try to do everything, because if you do, then you spread out the effort too much. We hope to continue to expand the areas where we are effective, where we have our memorials, where we do the activities. We're beginning in Lancaster very soon, and the Lehigh Valley as well. That's sort of, and everything that we do is interfaith as well. So when we go into a locale, we do outreach to all the faith communities there and pull them together into activities. They often have not, faith communities have not worked together, and we give them that opportunity, and it then passes on that they can do things other than gun violence prevention. So it's a good thing all around. But I think that it's possible that Pennsylvania is on the crux of some major changes, some major positive changes having to do with legislation. And there's a line from an old Crosby, Stills and Nash song about the darkest hour is just before the dawn. I think that in fact there are a lot of people, Judy and I were talking about this earlier, a lot of people who, because of the decisions lately made by the Supreme Court, are paying attention and are eager to get involved and bring about change. And if that happens, we can do it.
And as well as advocacy, legislative changes, political engagement, there is also the more personal one-to-one contact with youth and mentoring. Maxayn, if you would speak.
When I started Women of Valor 74, I took the pain that I went through as a young child and kind of said I want to start a program to help heal young girls. So that's the same thing I did with Job World 18, and I did it all myself. I knew something had to be done. I've researched to how do I start my own 501c3, how do I start my own program, and I did it because I knew something had to be done, and I wanted to reach youth because when I think about the person that took my son's life for no reason, I said, how can I reach these youth to love themselves, to look at themselves in a mirror so that when they see another person that looks like them, they can love them, they can understand them. You know, the person that took my son's life, I said he couldn't have loved himself because if he did, he wouldn't have took my son's future away. So I started the program on my own, and I always say, like, going back to her question, what can we do? There's a lot that we can do, you just have to take the first step. I also work for the city, so not only do I do the work in the community, but I just was like, okay, how else can I be involved? So I did produce a short documentary as well called Lasting Impact, and it talks about the lasting impact long after years have passed, how it affects the community, how it affects family and friends, and I take that and I go to different schools and I show it, and then we have a panel discussion about it, because I feel like in the heat of the moment, they're not thinking, but if they can see that impact, that lasting impact, they'll think before they pull a trigger. And I also work for the city of Philadelphia. I'm actually the executive assistant for the executive director of the Office of Violence Prevention. And I signed up for that job because I wanted to get on the inside. I wanted to see what are we really doing in the city of Philadelphia and how can I help. So I feel like there's so much that we can do. You just have to take the first steps to try to help with this issue. And I think doing these panels are very important as well, to have an open forum for others to talk about it and to, again, try to figure out what can we do to help.
I don't have anything to say. This is, you know, this project is what I've been doing, and the hope is that, like I said, people will seek out other organizations. And we do have on our website, we have a resources page that lists contact information, both for families that are grieving that might need support, and also for people that want to, you know, become active. And we also are expanding. We have a chapter in New Jersey, and we will be having a show that will highlight people from the whole state of Pennsylvania, which will be in Harrisburg next January.
And Laura, let me just speak to the genius of Souls Shot. In my opinion, the artist's engagement on behalf of this critically important issue, the pain associated with it, and with the hope of transforming that pain into real connection. So, you know, I can imagine that for the arts community, that this is an inspiration as well.
Yeah, it's very important to the artists. We have several who return each time, and I should also say, when I did create a portrait for the very first exhibition, and I swore I would never do another one because it's indescribably hard, because you're trying to get to know someone who you can't meet. And again, I'm speaking for most of the artists that I know, that we just have photographs stuck up all over our studios. We talk to them. It's just really, really difficult. And
could you speak a bit about the experience of the families associated and how the families become involved with Souls Shot?
I can speak a little, and then I'll let Maxayn talk about it.
Well, please.
For the very first exhibition, we were introduced to a support group where we were able to speak directly with some of the family members, and it's pretty much word of mouth since then. And I'm not sure how Maxayn found us, but it's a lot of word of mouth, and it takes a very strong person to do it, as I said before. So I'll let a strong person talk about
Maxayn, if you would share with us, thank you.
So I found Soul Shots I guess, I don't know, it's so weird how things just fall in my lap and I just become involved. I'm very grateful that ever since I saw Jason's picture and the work that Soul Shots does, anything Laura asks me to do, I'm like, I'm there, I'm on board, because I just think it's just so important and I love it. I love the portraits. I love the emotional connection that it gives us towards our family. And Carolyn, again, who did Jason's portrait, I remember, I didn't even talk to her. I basically sent her pictures. And she said when she was painting his picture, she was like, I just felt such sunshine and such rays of sun. And I literally was in tears because that's who he was. She felt his spirit. So when you talk about, the artist doing the paintings, I can only imagine, some of the emotion that they feel and what the spirit might give. So I can imagine it's hard, but I'm so grateful to the artists, as I tell Laura all the time, for them volunteering their time to do this, because I know it's very hard. I mean, because it's hard for us to see the portraits of our loved ones that are no longer here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We just have a few minutes remaining. I'm wondering if there are any questions that emerging from the members of our audience. I think the microphone is on its way to you. Here we go.
So seeing these portraits in our space the past several weeks has been profoundly moving to myself and to others. I've heard people describe the impact that these portraits have had on them. I'm curious about other venues in which this has or will continue to be made available as a vehicle for bringing people to greater awareness around the problem of gun violence in our society.
We have shown in houses of worship like this, also libraries, universities, the state capitol 3 times, City Hall. There's an exhibition right now which is about the project, and it has some of the portraits that we retire the portraits after 1 year. They travel for 1 year. So we were asked if City Hall could do something about the project, and so we asked some of the artists. The artists own the portraits, and many of them do give them to the families, but we don't keep track of that information, so I just put out a blanket call to past artists, and I think there's about 35 portraits that were re-loaned to us. And so it's an amazing, who is, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, who runs the arts and culture at City Hall, put together the exhibit, and it's really spectacular. So yeah, universities, art galleries.
Houses of worship.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
So.
Please.
Schools?
No, not.
Is there no interest?
Well, not counting colleges and universities. No.
Like high schools.
Yeah.
Like Masterman or?
No. We did have a private girls' school that wanted to host the exhibition, but they didn't have the space. But yeah, that would be great. It would be wonderful to have it in high schools. The other interesting thing about where we go is, and I think you mentioned this, that it's wonderful to have it in neighborhoods that are affected by the gun violence, because we're honoring these people. But it's also wonderful to have it, at a church on the main line where they don't live with the daily fear. So.
Great question. Thank you so much.
Laura's last point. We started out exhibiting the Memorial to the Lost in urban locations in Chester and Camden and in the city here in Philadelphia. And we were going to put it up maybe a third time in Chester, and an African-American pastor said, "Don't bother. We know how bad the problem is here." She said, "Go out to Springfield and Wallingford and Media and so on and exhibit it there, because that's where we need to change minds and hearts." And so we actually, although we exhibit here in Philadelphia, we now have individual memorials to the lost in the other counties around Philadelphia. And we concentrate much of our effort on being out there in presence in the suburbs, because that's where the votes are, frankly. So,
other questions? No? All right. Let me say thank you to our panelists. Tom, this is the beautiful portrait of Jason Ahmed Patton, Maxayn Gooden's beautiful son. And we can see the sunshine in his face, his beautiful soul radiating.
Can I just say his name? His name means Jason. Jah in Rastafarian means God. Sun is the center of the earth, so his name means God is the center of all things. And so I just wanted to share that. His name was initially going to be Ahmad, but I wound up switching it and making that his middle name. So his name just means everything.
He is truly a beautiful young man. We are so honored here at the Cathedral to be a site to again exhibit these extraordinary portraits from the Soul Shot Portraits Project. If you are interested in bringing Soul's shots to your house of worship or to your school, a marvelous idea, or to another venue, I'm sure that Laura Madeleine would be glad to talk with you about that. We will also include some information about Heeding God's Call and about Jah World 18 and Women of Valor 74. The three of you are extraordinary, incredible inspirations for doing God's work, heeding God's call surely, and you set forth both an invitation and a challenge to all of us. And I would like to close by saying, especially to Maxayn, thank you. Thank you for your courage, for your valor, for your spirit, for the light which is so clearly in you and that you share with so many. And may God bless all of our efforts to bring an end to gun violence in this city, in this state, and throughout our country. Thank you.